because I'll go through it in some detail. But if you haven't seen it, please Google UBC video game law, and you will see the course website, which hopefully will be relevant to you in a number of respects. But in particular, I'd suggest it's a pretty decent research tool for your papers. I will, after the talk today, sort of give you a guided tour of the website with my opinions on what's important and what isn't important for your purposes. And I will try and explain why we even have a website, because that's kind of a fluke, and the various purposes that it serves. Any questions before we get started? Okay, so I've been teaching here since 1993, and this is the first year that I have not walked in with half a tree in paper by way of syllabi to hand out. And the reason for that is that you will see on the website, under a tab called Syllabus, the live syllabus of the course. What does live syllabus mean? As you'll see, it means that I'll be changing and adding everything but the materials that you're responsible for having read and reviewed before you come into the course. That will not change. That is now etched in stone for the rest of the year. So I try very hard not to change stuff up on people. But guest speakers will change. So I can tell you that our guest speaker for next week, and I haven't put it up on the website yet, is Brian Dartnell, who's the General Counsel of Electronic Arts here in Vancouver. And Brian's talked to this class every year, but he's always been the last talk. This year on reflection, I thought, Brian's talk should actually be the first talk, because he talks about what a video game lawyer really does, and he covers a huge tranche of territory. And rather than have it as a recap, it'd actually be most useful to you to see him and hear him right at the front end as he identifies issues. And so I really changed it up on him, sent him an email on extremely short notice, and he said yes. So I have not yet been able to reflect that on the syllabus. And those are the kinds of things that get posted on the website and get changed in the syllabus. The other reason it's live is through some miraculous intervention, I guess, that really has a rational explanation in law being open by doctrine, if not by inclination. Every single source that I would have you read, every single case that I would have you read, exists in full on the open internet. Every video I want you to see. And so the syllabus, as you scroll through it, actually has everything you need to do to prepare for class is actually embedded in the syllabus. You never have to leave. Never mind the website, you never have to leave the syllabus to prepare for class. So hopefully that makes it easier for you. I was flabbergasted. I thought it was a cool idea. It only took me 2 hours to do last year, which is a whole other thing, because I expected this was going to be a giant project if I could even get it there. Now there's a couple of papers. There's a couple of papers where, no worries. There's a couple of papers where you are not going to be reading the published journal version, but the final pre-publication SSRN version. And I don't know that it makes any difference whatsoever. So, so hopefully that's sort of the beginning guides. As we go through today, hopefully you'll get a better idea of the course. I am not going to give you a bio of myself. The bio's in the back of the website if you really want to see it, other than telling you that I have been a media and communications lawyer my entire career, with a particularly strange bent towards freedom of expression, and particularly the freedom of expression of creators, and that I have been teaching pretty well every year since 1993 at the law school. I think that's all you really need to know about me. If you really want to look at the bio, it's at the back of the website. If you're actually interested in a real CV-ish kind of thing, then go to LinkedIn and look me up and all of that. Any questions to this point? Okay, the other thing is there's an experimental nature to this course, and I probably should explain it, and I should probably explain the motivation behind it. I've been in media, I've been a media executive, I've started a television station, which now is at Robson and Burrard for CTV in 1997. So I just have this natural inclination towards media, and I have a curiosity and some wonderful co-conspirators at the Center for Teaching, Learning, and Technology at UBC who've sort of pushed me. And I just want to see what teachers can do. So the experimental nature of some of the things you're going to see in the website, and the fact that we're videoing the classes and all of that, is really just about me experimenting with teaching and websites. The videos should be irrelevant to you. We take attendance in this course. I expect you to be here. I don't see any reason you'll ever go to the videos, or any reason that you should. I'll talk a little bit more about this later, but if you have some obsessive need for detail, you can actually go back 2 years and see the same talks that I'm giving. Although, this year's talk is 40% different than last year's. And that one was 40% different from the year before. And I expect that to continue. I think those old videos are absolutely irrelevant. They're interesting. It's interesting that they're there. They create an interesting historical record. I think for your purposes and your research purposes and your academic purposes, I don't want to say they're irrelevant. They're all but irrelevant. There are other things on the website that I hope are very useful to you. Any questions thus far? I really want to be interrupted this year as much as possible, and I want to make more room for conversation and back and forth. You are the 8th cohort of video game law. You are the largest cohort ever for video game law. So even when I gave it jointly between UBC and UVic, we did 1 year of a video experiment. This year's, there's lots of little experiments that we'll talk about. This year's grand pedagogic experiment, and I don't know if it will happen, is there's a particular talk on future technologies. It's sort of, we'll go through the syllabus. It's 7 or 8. It's week 7 or 8. Someone, a developer I know who is working very hard with Oculus Rift, which is a 3D immersive technology. We've come up with the idea of having 10 Oculus, teaching that class in Oculus Rift. So there will be, any number of from 0 to 10 volunteers. I think we probably can only get about 10 Oculuses. If anybody's interested in immersing themselves in future tech and seeing the deficiencies, of which I promise you there are many, and the advantages. The real advantage will be I will not appear like this. I will just be a cute little avatar, which is kind of the only time I'm cute. So there'll be some version of me, but we'll see if it works. And I guess that's the only time that having the videos is relevant, because if it turns into a giant fail, you still can see the class, and it's not lost to you. So the other thing is this is the text for the course. It's the second edition of Video Game Law, which I wrote with two wonderful, I used to call them young lawyers, they're not so young anymore, Chris Metcalf, who's at SAP, and Rock Ripley, who's at Gowlings, who you will hear from, and Rock's now a partner at Gowlings. And I convinced him to do this because I said it would help him become a partner, so hopefully it did. Well, he's a partner. Whether it helped him or not, we'll never really know. So it's available in the bookstore. There are used copies available in the bookstore. There's a first edition, which if I can convince the publisher in the course of this year, we might put up as a Wikipedia page on the website as well. And that could be the source of other experimentation. Anyways, questions? Oh, on the syllabus, you will find all those wonderful things about policies, the paper, what's expected, and hopefully you'll find me open and approachable to talk about papers. So this is the 8th year. Interesting thing about the world of academia, the original idea for this course was a course outline. And it was rejected. I've been teaching here since 1993. I think it was probably 2000. So I've been teaching here for 10 years. And it was rejected as too far out there. But then LexisNexis got interested in the course outline as a book. So I wrote the first book by myself in 2005. And that's it. Horrible cover. They had control of the cover. I fought with them. I thought it was a disaster. When they wanted a second edition, I said, the only thing I insist on is control of the cover. Anyways, I don't know. Well, it is better. It's a wonderful piece of art by a great friend of mine. In any event, wrote the book, and suddenly the way the world works is if there's a book, an academic book on a subject, then there's renewed interest in the course. Hence, the course started. Now, where am I? The experimental nature of this course was embedded right from the beginning. In 2005, 2006, I guess I had pitched the course to 2 law schools, and at the end of the day, both UVic Law and UBC Law wanted it post-publication, and we had 13 students at each law school, maximum of 13, and we video conferenced. And every second week, I'd fly over to UVic and have a TA here, and we just alternated my physical presence. And this, just remember when this was. This was a long time ago. It actually worked pretty well. That does not mean the Oculus Rift experiment will work at all. So it just means that we try stuff. And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. Oh, the worst disaster that we ever tried, and I'm sure you'll completely understand the reasons. 2 years ago, thought it was a really cool idea since everybody had one of these and everybody could take videos, that we build a back-end site where people could upload videos, their own comments on the course or their own questions, and I could respond, and we got 0 takers. It doesn't even exist anywhere. This is now, and I think it's to your benefit, for example, the Brian Dartnell coming next week thing. This is version 2.3 of the course. This is the 3rd year of a brand new version of the course. For the first 5 years, it was a certain kind of course and had a certain kind of format. And then I ripped it up. I started literally from a clean sheet of paper. This is the 3rd year, so it's getting to a place where it's consistent and understandable. I'm not very far away. I'm only going to teach it this way. Either it's going to end at the end of this year and I'm going to start with a new clean sheet of paper, or maybe 1 more year. At which point, whoever is the first class of 3.0, look out, because it's chaos. Tell them, don't take the course. First year, it was a blog, UBC blog site. Last year, it turned into a legitimate website, keeping all the content. This year, there's a lot of ex-students in the class. There's a huge community. There are academics in this institution and others who have at various times posted on the website. And so for the first year, I've worked with CTLT. If you scroll through the website on the right-hand side, you'll see we've created all sorts of ways of following and joining in. And that's partially for you. If you want email reminders of anything that's on the website, by all means, sign up for it. But it's really to try and create a community and a community of practitioners. So when I talk to Brian Dartnell, I'm going to try and convince him for the first time, and I think we've now created the facility, that we're going to get him the right password so he can post. So if he's got something interesting to say to you guys, it'll be there. Pedagogic goals. You can only imagine I've never talked about this stuff. This sort of started last year. Because I've never thought about this stuff, but around this course, it started becoming obvious. So this course is an experiment, to some extent, in just getting you engaged. Engagement is the thing. You're usually, and we'll talk about who you are, when I get through this, we're going to talk about, I want to hear from you guys and what your goals are in taking the course, and just start getting a sense of who you are. And we'll also run through the syllabus and the website. But you're a self-selected group. Chances are, from past experience, you're pretty digital literate. Many of you, though not all of you, are serious gamers and pretty hardcore and love it, some to the point of addiction. We deal with that as well, at least academically, not practically. And you're not a hard group to get engaged. And what's really wonderful and what allows for some community initiative is that I'm still in touch with a lot of students who are in this course who are practicing in the area. And they actually want to engage with you guys. You'll see a welcome message on the website, and there are two replies to it from welcome to you. There's 2 replies from former students, both addressing you guys. The first one, I think, is extremely helpful because it tells you some things that I'll repeat here in terms of do's and don'ts in a very practical sense. The second one is very, very nice, far too complimentary about me, and therefore not particularly useful to you. So engagement is number one. Number two is creating perspective. And talk about that. But there's a design to this course, and it's about creating perspective. And the third is appreciating legal complexity. And I'll actually talk about that before we're done this set of slides. EVE Online is kind of a good example, to me, of all three. One footnote: if you are not a hardcore gamer, if you are not a gamer, that is more than okay. People who are not either have done very well in this class. And I'll talk about why in a minute, but you can either take a first person or a third, there's a lot of gaming metaphors here, first person or third person approach to this course. So there's a pedagogic theory which I've completely invented. You know, in research they tell you don't fit the data to the result you want. Well, this is completely fitting the data to the result I want. This course, it occurred to me long after we were doing it, is a bit of an experiment in a massively multiplayer online role-playing game. That serves you best in terms of pedagogy. So, you know, when you think about engagement and you think about becoming a lawyer, what's the most engaging form of goal-oriented interactivity that requires skills growth, path choices, and reflection? Video games. So that's the thought. How do we do it? So like the structure of good video games, or many good video games, there's a quest. The quest in this course is a great paper. That's the bulk of the marks. And a great paper, in my experience, which is now becoming long, is about you finding something that you're passionate and interested in and focusing on that. This is an area, as you'll see shortly, where there's endless opportunities to make contributions. There's endless opportunities to get published in law reviews, if that's what you want. And I'm here to help you do that if that's what you want. Open world, vast terrain to explore on a non-linear path. I'm going to say this several times, but I'm going to start now. If you are one of those law students, and there are those law students, who feel like you have to read and know every bit of material in the course, in the book, on the website, that you can't do this course unless you go through absolutely everything, at least on some level, for your own sake, leave now. It cannot be done in this course. There's too much stuff. If you were just going to go through the website, if you were going to read, in fact, the first reply to my post welcoming you guys is about that. It says, and it's only about one aspect of the course. If you just read every article that I post in News of the Week every week, you will lose so much time that it's going to affect your other courses. This is a 2-credit course. You need to approach it that way. The vastness of the material is there to help you write a great paper. and hopefully to make you interested and to allow you to explore the terrain you want to explore. But if you are one of those students who feel you have to have mastery over every single aspect, it is not worth it. It wouldn't be worth it for a 4-credit course. So don't do that. Start identifying as soon as you can, hey, I'm really interested in this. And remember that 70% is your paper, the other 30% is participation. And hopefully, I'll convince you that all of the areas, or most of the areas in this course, are interrelated to each other one way or another. So you don't have to tune out to things you're not interested in because they actually will be relevant in some aspect. But there's an opportunity for huge depth. If you try for depth and breadth, there's just too much stuff for a 2-credit course. Don't do it. Your instructor is telling you not to do it. I'm not giving you permission. I'm warning you. So treat it like, if for those of you who are gamers, like an open world game. Go where you want to go. Go deeply. Go hard. But keep your focus. And bring in other things because they really are relevant. This video game law is quite interdisciplinary in an interesting way, which hopefully you'll discover over the course. Can be played from a first-person or third-person perspective. That really has to do with there are people here who are incredibly passionate about games. Games are your lives, and law school is what you have to do to keep your parents off your back. And there are people here who, gee, this sounds really interesting, cutting-edge intellectual property. I don't know that I care about games, but I think it's an interesting subject, or whatever. I heard the course was interesting. So you can have a more divorced third-person perspective, or you can have a gung-ho first-person perspective. They are equally not only acceptable, but I will say equally successful, in my view, in this course. So don't worry about that. Continuing our metaphor on pedagogy in terms of games, there's user-generated content. Really want you to post on the website. There's a great experiment that this course has been asked to be part of. Unfortunately, academia and academic technologies being what they are, it's not going to be incorporated into this year's course. The technology's just not quite ready. And that is, there's a badging experiment at UBC. And where this really awesome game analogy, and this is a UBC thing, where students get badges for achievements on the course website. And just to give you a sense of my pedagogic philosophy, I said to them when they asked me if I'd be part of it, I said, great, I think it's fun. I will not mark on it, and those badges will not be subjective. So I'm not going to create and this won't apply to your class, unfortunately, but maybe I'll tell you a little bit about my philosophy. I won't create a great post badge that goes on to your post. I won't do anything subjective. Student who posts the most, the student who gets the most reply to their posts. Anything objective, I'm good with badging. Also, I will not mark on it, at least in the first year of the experiment, which won't be this year, it'll be next year. So I think all of these technologies are wonderful. I think they're an incredible amount of fun. Likewise, if you don't want to post on the website, but you're going, gee whiz, I want to do well in participation and I'm quiet in class, send me emails. We can have email discussions. If anyone's worried about privacy, that's totally cool. And it's never been an issue in this course, and it's never been an issue with the students in this course, but it can be, and that's totally legitimate, and I would, and no one gets penalized because most of this stuff is just fun. The paper's serious. Make no mistake. Additional downloadable content, news of the week, other things that we'll talk about, and where they came from. Multiplayer engagement, obviously, duh. It's about you guys talking to each other. Way more important than you guys talking to me or hearing from me. The best things that have ever happened on the website are students engaging with each other on a particular subject. Absolutely the most fun stuff. And I guess I'll use the game metaphor for those of you who are gamers of Assassin's Creed. Having many of these aspects. If anybody can think of a better example, I'm really open to it.
Well, in this class, you could be a woman.
Sorry?
In this class, you could be a woman.
Yes.
You can't
You can't in
in Assassin's Creed.
Assassin's Creed. Very good. All right. For that reason alone, I need a new nominee for the game to show. We talked about the website. I'll lead you through it later. Some tips. This is the email from last night. So as such, the one major piece of advice I give to you is get on Twitter and follow my Twitter site. It's very nice of him to say I think that may give you too much information. And then he says, also read his weekly news. Be selective. You'll lose hours if you read every article. That's really good advice. And we'll talk about the weekly news. On the website, this is a plea from me. The first year we had the website, students just engaged with each other. Somebody posted something and somebody posted something else, and they were just, it wasn't at all nasty, but there were open disagreements, lots of short posts, lots of little stuff. Last year, and I don't know why, and I think this is kind of endemic to law students, and I don't know if it's competition or maybe because the website became kind of more polished and was on the UBC law, had a UBC law school URL, or I don't know what. The students posted, but they posted these deep, thoughtful posts, and nobody really engaged back. And it seemed mostly about, I guess my expectation is that everybody in this class will post one kind of serious post and 2 or 3 replies to other students. And I said that at the beginning of last year. But it felt like everybody wanted to be really, really polished. That's not what I'm looking for. I'm looking for engagement, and it's not fair. I didn't say that to students last year, and I'm saying it to you. I think just engaging and engaging others, and we live in the era of the tweet. Your posts can be short. Your replies can be short. They can be as short or long as you want them to be. But it's a lot more fun for everybody if we're just talking about stuff. Don't worry about whether you have a deep thought or not. If you do, post it, and you will. Inevitably, you'll have opinions on stuff here. So don't hold yourself on too much of a higher standard. For those of you who tweet and you see something interesting, please hashtag UBCVGL. As you'll see on the website, it shows up in a side post. My great colleague and co-author, Rock Ripley, dominates that tweet box. If you go to the website, we need to drive Rock out of there. We need to do it ourselves and get our guest speakers to do more stuff as well. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but you'll notice that we're not doing this within a learning management system. We're doing this in an open source WordPress website. That's partially an experiment. It's partially because I'm so stupid that I can't make learning management systems work. and it's really true. I'm absolutely hopeless at it. It also, to me, over time, again, this is self-serving because I realized it much later, I don't see how learning management systems engage you. You're used to Facebook, you're used to videos, you're used to a form of visual engagement online, and LMAs give you, little boxes to open, and it just, I don't get it, so I don't do it. But the one thing I feel strongly about in terms of open, and it's the last thing I'll say on this slide, you can find all this somewhere in the back of the website, is that both law and education are intended to be open. Law, as you know, being second and third year students, ignorance of the law is no excuse. Well, if ignorance of the law is no excuse, then the law has to be known. And if no one has yet recommended to you or made you read Tom Bingham's book, The Rule of Law, which is a very slim volume, I recommend it, and I think no one should graduate law school not having read it. And it serves as a very good reminder of how important openness is. And I am thrilled that the law faculty here has always encouraged this experiment, and Ben Gould has always encouraged this experiment, and it means a lot. But to me, it's more than just freedom of expression. It's a responsibility we have when we're talking about law to make it publicly available. And likewise, education is built on openness. That's why we have, that's why people publish work. And you can't get a good mark on a paper unless you cite other papers. If those papers were not open in some way or accessible, you couldn't cite them. So you'll see there's a Creative Commons attribution license, which is important to your decision as to whether you want to post on the site, because there is a Creative Commons license on it, and it allows people to reuse and remix what's on it. So if you're a intellectual property literalist, which obviously I'm not, then you may want to think about it and just do email exchanges with me. Again, that's never been an issue, but I mention it for purposes of intellectual and academic honesty. Another resource is there was a special issue of the UBC Law Review that came out about a year ago on digital media and the law, and it's obviously available to you. And I'll mention that two students, very proud of this, two ex-students of this class had papers published. Sarah Grimes, who is now a professor in the iSchool at the University of Toronto and took this course in 2006-07, somewhere in there, and Michaela Fiorito, who just graduated. And I find it really wonderful and a bit fascinating that even though this course has always been about 70% male, 70 to 80% male, the two published papers that came out of this course are from women. So, point of pride. I said I wouldn't give you a professional bio. I do feel compelled to give you a gaming bio because it's relevant. I played a lot of Pong in law school, which for me was 1976 to 1980 at McGill. And I played a lot of Intellivision in law school. Well, I guess Pong was in high school. 73, 74, 75 at the local bowling alley, Perret Lanes. And the Intellivision was in law school with my friend Peter Hamilton, who was our gold medalist, and I think is currently practicing at Blake's in Toronto. And his marks didn't suffer, but mine obviously did. by the amount of Intellivision we play. That's how I rationalized my poor marks in law school anyways, since I was playing Intellivision. I am one of the 7 people who bought a Sega Saturn. For those of you who don't know what a Sega Saturn is, it was the first, it was a pretty good idea in many ways. It was the first game console that had a CD disc in it. My real connection to gaming came through a game called Grand Prix Legends. And Grand Prix Legends came out in 1997, and I took it off my hard drive about 2 years ago. And there's a reason for that, and there's a reason for why Grand Prix Legends is what really got me into gaming. So Grand Prix Legends is a racing game about the 1967 Formula One season. It contained a number of technological advancements. The most notable and comprehensible is that the physics in the game were based on the fact that there were 4 tires, and the tires are the contact patches to the pavement. Up until Grand Prix Legends, all racing games had a central pivot point at the center of the car, and the physics of the game were based on simply turning the pivot point. That's, of course, not how cars drive. Cars drive on 4 tires and the physics of the connection to the ground. So Grand Prix Legends had that revolutionary breakthrough. The problem was it was a game so far ahead of its time that it just didn't work. And what do I mean by it didn't work? It required a wheel and pedals at a time, 1997, where there were very few wheel and pedals available. You couldn't play the game without wheel and pedals. It wasn't that it was hard to play. You physically couldn't play it. It didn't allow you to play it without a wheel and pedals. It didn't allow you to play the game. You couldn't play the game unless you had a video card. We all now are very comfortable with video cards. In 1997, 98% of computers didn't have video cards. And so you had to go out, buy a very expensive card, of which there were only 2 kinds at the time, and install. You almost had to be a geek to make Grand Prix Legends work. It advertised multiplayer. Multiplayer didn't work at all. It came out in an unfinished state, and if you notice, if you want to go to PC Gaming and look at, you can pull out historical reviews, and I think it got like a 65 or something. But it had this physics breakthrough, and it also had a very interesting vintage, and a community arose out around this game. And this is the interesting part. The community fixed the game. The community actually, it was like the $6 million man. You know, we can rebuild it. So the community literally built this game, made multiplayer work, did enhancements to the graphics that you can't even imagine. I mean, you can actually Google Grand Prix Legends, go to images. Hopefully you'll see some images of the original game, and then you'll see the incredible art, and everything that looks good on that game was built by the community. It also became, in terms of the forums, a level of just, there was this incredible level of obsession. There was a forum string on the Monza track and getting it right that went on for 256 pages, with people posting pictures of, you know, what were the right what was the right signage, and then somebody else, you know, creating the graphics for that signage that you dropped into your Monza folder, and it just became this huge community thing, and it was quite an amazing community in many ways. And sort of the one story I remember, and I wish I could find absolute proof of, because the forums are gone now, was a woman whose father was very ill and who had driven one race. It wasn't actually a Formula One race. It was a race in South Africa that was a parallel series and involved Formula One cars. And he had driven one race in the 67 season. And she wanted to know whether there was a way of recreating, sorry, I get choked up, recreating the car he drove. And the leaders of the online community just said, let's take this offline. And it was very clear that they just built the car. And she had a working model of the race her father drove, and I'm sure her father was able to drive sort of some version of his old car. So you learn about community in that way. Years later, my aha moment in gaming was when they first got multiplayer working, a multiplayer race where I realized I was online and racing in real time. This would be 1998, 1999, with people from South America, from Europe, all seemingly live all at the same time. I know we take that for granted now, but that's a huge aha moment. I remember in 2006, 2007, in a race with subsequent people who made this game, now make a game called iRacing. In the early days of iRacing, I would race against Dale Earnhardt Jr., who was on iRacing under his own name, and you'd hear him talk, and there were these fascinating community moments that have a lot to do with gaming. What does that have to do with law? Actually, a lot. Think about the copyright implications of taking a game and modifying it and changing it and making a whole new game out of it. Even if all the impacts are totally wonderful, modding like that runs into all sorts of legal problems. And as you will see as we go through the course, I've obviously been profoundly affected by my experience around there. This is my current racing setup. You don't actually get to see the very, very fancy pedal set, the custom-made pedal set that's underneath the desk. But today, I mostly play Omar Sharif Bridge on this because, like everybody else, mobile devices have overtaken my life. Did get a PlayStation 4. It's terrible. These digital cameras show how dusty everything is. A little while ago, not playing it as much as I want to, but I'm really looking forward to Destiny next week. And part of the reason I'm not playing it is there's very few racing games out yet, but they're coming out in the next couple of months. So what is video game law? Is it a unique area? Anybody ever hear of the law of the horse controversy? No. Okay. You can look it up. You can Google, feel free to Google law of the horse. So when internet law first became a possible subject in law schools in the mid-90s, there was criticism of the fact that there was pedagogy in legitimate law schools around internet law. And the criticism was that this was law of the horse. And law of the horse means we could teach a course in law school about law of the horse. We could take aspects of contract law. We could, take consumer law aspects, we could take animal welfare law aspects, and we could apply it and come up with a 13-week course on horses and the law relating to horses. And that was seen as a really bad thing, and the argument was law of the horse is not real law that we should be teaching in law school, and internet law is law of the horse. To the rescue came a rather brilliant guy, Lawrence Lessig from Harvard Law, who you will have heard of, and you will certainly hear and see, hear of, and see, at least on videos during this course, who decisively dismantled, and I'm not going to get into the history of legal pedagogy, it's all there on Google, the argument that internet law should not be taught, and that it was a real subject. So video game law can be, some could argue, and maybe this is why the first syllabus was rejected, could be said to be law of the horse. I don't think it is at all. I think it's something very, very different, and I'm about to explain to you what's different about it. What's the relationship between this course and media and entertainment law? And I've taught media and entertainment law here, sort of many seasons of it. And they are entirely different courses. Entirely different. Media and entertainment law has got a body of law that goes back about 100 years, and the principles have pretty well been enunciated. There's not a lot new under the sun in media and entertainment law, per se. And what does it do with digital? It tries to fit the square pegs of digital into the round holes that media and entertainment law already creates. Around copyright, around contract, et cetera, et cetera. Oh yeah, we know what that is. We'll just put it in our little strainer and our little mix master, and it'll come out as media and entertainment law. Video game law allows us to look through, I'd say, the lens of what's really happening, and the relationship is really kind of the relationship between Newtonian physics and string theory. Video game law being string theory, being extremely complex. So why is it complex? Why is this happening? If you think about it, this course really could be called super highly advanced intellectual property law. Except that it's not really intellectual property law because contract has superseded intellectual property law. That's too long as a name, of course. And it doesn't really make the point. Here's the point. The point is that video games have been well funded and have been advancing, sometimes in fits and starts, through voice over IP, a decade before Skype came, or at least came into public consciousness. Control mechanisms, now the rage. You have control over various things through your iPhone or through other devices, and now soon, through the watch that you can buy or are about to be able to buy from Apple or whoever. If you're a gamer, control devices are old hat. Including even voice commands. Community. Well, I just gave you the video, the Grand Prix Legends talk. We had community in games long before all this notion of social media and this larger sense of community that's emerging today. Open worlds, again, that's transcending games now. There's more. Avatars, 3D, portability. Well, you know, many of you, I'm guessing, had Nintendo 3DSs and, or Nintendo handheld devices long before we had this. Now, the form factor is very similar. You know, the favorite experiment, so close yet so far, was, anybody remember the Nokia phone video game device? The Engage. And the studio for Engage was in Richmond, in fact. And if we have a chance, my friend Greg Sauter, maybe I can convince him to come talk to the class. He ran that studio. So close yet so far. You know, had games and phones in the same device, but didn't quite create the infrastructure that the iPhone eventually did. Microtransactions. Well, you know, we've been buying add-ons and sequels, if we're gamers, for a very, very long time. They may not exactly be microtransactions, but they're additional transactions. And we were certainly early into the microtransaction game. And just one I've noticed recently. Ever hear of game jams? Those of you who are hardcore will have heard of game jams. A game jam is basically a party over a weekend where you build a game with a bunch of people, and you get into a giant room and you work in teams, and it's not, I won't say it's competitive, it's not really, but everybody works together, and at the end of the weekend you show your games, and it's a lot of fun. Well, if you're following the digital world, you'll see that there's suddenly all sorts of other dash jams that are starting. Tech jams, and you know, we're now jamming on everything. It's just a small example of how video games tend to innovate, and I think there's not huge romantic reasons why this happens. I think it happens because the money is there. And the rest of the digital world follows. The big one, of course, now is Oculus Rift, which started as a gaming device. Facebook decides to spend $2 billion to buy the company, and is very clear that they see that, you know, virtual reality devices apply across the board to a lot of other things. Apply to making what we would think of as film and TV, apply to the social media world, et cetera, et cetera. So again, what starts out as a gaming idea may well morph into something more broad. Let's take 5 minutes. So you guys have a break, and we will get through all of this before 12.
Just do it.
Think we're good?
Yeah. Okay. I think you're right, man.
Just in time.
Staff do that, or like sleep on this chair.
Okay, so the agenda should take us to about 12:20. Is talk a bit more about sort of a couple of basic concepts, leave you with a couple of legal conundrums, and then take you on a brief tour of the website with a particular view to showing you things that may be useful to you in the context of the work you're going to do in the course, and things you can just ignore unless you really want to look at them. So what is a game? Game is play. And my perspective, which you can differ from, is that games are creative. And playing games is a creative exercise. And that has, if you accept it, huge legal implications, which you will see throughout the course. Now, if you say, no, games aren't creative, they are simply reactive. If you're playing a game, you're just a rat in somebody else's maze. If that's your perspective, then that also has some interesting legal implications. And particularly if you think of it in the context of freedom of speech, freedom of expression. If you're just a rat in a maze and there's no creativity, then those freedoms don't actually exist. And they don't mediate your relationship with the game or the people who created the game. And that has serious intellectual property implications and possibly other implications as well. The antecedents to games, I just put down a few. Dungeons and Dragons, pinball, comic books. Particularly interesting from a free speech, free expression perspective. I'll bring in an article next week, but there are some cities in the United States that have just allowed arcades for the first time. I've had bans on arcades for a very, very long time. And what you're going to see a certain amount of in this course is how fears of corrupting youth have consistently come to the forefront, and they pass through different mediums. And sometimes it's helpful to look at this stuff in the context of mediums or games from a long time ago and go, oh, this looks just like the issue we're facing today. And a lot of it, when it came to the debate around violence in games, you could look to a number of places and remind yourself that correlation doesn't equal causation. Now, I see an exception to this. There has been, in the last year, I would say in some ways, particularly in the last 3 months, both within the video game industry and the technology industry, a real outing, and a really healthy outing, in my view, around misogyny in games, outside of games, and in the industry. And I think you'll find it well chronicled in News of the Week if you're looking for a historical perspective. I'm not sure I fully understand why I feel this way, but I feel like the misogyny issue is a very different issue from the violence issue. And that's one of the things I'd like to explore during this course. If you look at my intro to you guys that's posted on the website, I sort of say every year there's a thing that emerges. I don't know if this is going to be the thing for this year or not. It sort of feels that way. But there are usually unresolved questions at the beginning of every year, and my wrap-up talk at the end of the year has, at least for the last couple of years, been able to wrap up and maybe even give myself some new perspectives on some of those issues. So the misogyny issue has really exploded in a number of ways. And we'll leave it at that, and we'll see where it goes. One of the things that's really important about games, and again, that has incredible legal consequences, and again, you have to decide how you want to interpret it. If you believe that the gamer is in control of the game, not only is the gamer creating, but the gamer is, think of the old metaphor think of television in metaphoric terms. There is a transmitter, literally, physically called a transmitter, and it transmits information to a passive viewer, being you. Video games turn that around. And whether you believe they really turn it around or it's just the illusion of turning it around is one question that has legal consequences. But there's even a position that can be taken that says even if it's an illusion, it doesn't actually matter. And again, these are very nuanced arguments as you look at freedom of expression and IP. And increasingly privacy issues. I think these are sort of relevant too. What's my space? What do I control? So what do games do? Games turn that around. You're no longer the passive viewer. The gaming world responds to you. You're the transmitter. You literally hold a controller. I mean, the words are actually perfect for all of this. So the entertainment metaphor is turned on its head, and the laws that apply to passive entertainment mediums, if I can call it that, it should be no surprise that those get called into question. Now, you don't have to accept my views around where this should go. And there are lots of other views that are possible. And you're in law school, so it's a good thing that there are many views. And you should come up with yours. But the question's a real one. And that inversion is not insignificant. And though gaming may have done it first, we now see what Twitter is doing to newsrooms around the world. We see this inversion happening in other industries as they become digital. So it's not a one-off. It's not a complete fluke. And I'm biased, but I think it's really interesting. And it's particularly interesting as lawyers because it has implications. Why do we game? Is kind of the next question, but I just want to drift off a little sideways. I hopefully don't do too many diversions, but I think this is just a relevant diversion. The debate, there was this article in the New York Times, no less, and whether you agree with it or not, and I really question this last line, but I've highlighted it. Why would real football players spend their time playing fake football? So the argument is that Madden NFL portrays real football and that Madden NFL is in and of itself can be regarded as a sport. The games are a legitimate sporting activity. And the last line is, because it's not fake, it's football. I find that a bit of a long bow, even as a gamer, but it's an interesting perspective, and it can be disagreed with. And this is a Twitter exchange with a friend of mine who's a tech guy in New York, but originally from Vancouver and a graduate of this law school, where he violently disagrees with this position. Whatever you may think, it's real, because video games have actually literally become a sport. And you can see that. And people are watching ESPN2 broadcast, and I'm trying to remember the viewership, but it was quite high, a video game competition for Dota a couple of weeks ago. Gamers are being recognized as athletes for the purposes of visas. You know, the culture is changing. Amazon is spending $970 million to purchase Twitch, which shows competitive gaming, but also shows a lot of gaming playthroughs. So something's going on here. And it relates to this question of what is a game. And why is this important? Again, it's important to you because if, in fact, video gaming is more than your relationship to the game, it's also a sport, it also has larger media implications, the law relating to it just gets richer and richer and richer. I would never have dreamt that there could be a paper on the legal implications of video games as a professional sport. When this course started, that would never have been on the agenda. Somebody this year or next year is going to write that paper. And just, you know, sort of confirmation of how games relate to larger media strategies. You know, your video game, if you're a sports league, I'm not saying it has quite the importance as of your broadcast contract, but it's starting to get into the same territory. So why is this? So it's really bad form to quote a relative, but my second cousin was a psychologist by the name of Leon Festinger, who you might have heard of if you took first-year psychology, because he came up with something called the theory of cognitive dissonance, which is basically why we rationalize. So we have a long history in my family of academics who have done well stating the perfectly obvious. And I try and follow in those footsteps. I'm kidding, he's an amazing man. I don't know that he knew he was ill, but a couple of years before he passed away, he did, and I only discovered this a couple of years ago, because I never read this book. He closed up his lab at the New School for Social Research in New York because, and it's actually in the introduction of the book, he felt he was sort of studying more and more about less and less, and it wasn't answering any of the big questions. And so he wrote a book. It was a mix of, his final book was a mix of physical and cultural anthropology, my interpretation. And in the introduction, he said something amazing. And remember, you know, this is a relative who I knew speaking from the other side of the grave, as it were. Because I only read this a couple of years ago. I was already teaching video game law. Equally strange is our general addiction, and he wrote this in 82. He probably wrote it in 80 or 81, in fact. Equally strange is our general addiction to games, both physical and mental. The profusion of games is truly startling. Card games, board games, word games, ball games, electronic games. Wow, pretty cool that he knew that and that he saw that in the early 80s. And then he talks about sports. We even assemble in huge crowds to watch others playing games. It's really interesting because now we're assembling in huge crowds to watch. Come on. To watch others play electronic games. Sort of an interesting problem. Why is this happening? Is it that we're bored? I can find nothing in the academic literature or the scientific literature that helps me understand such bizarre behavior. So that's a really profound question from a really, really smart guy. So, very simplistic catalog of possible answers. We're Canadian, so we have to start with McLuhan. I think it's written in sort of every academic rule book. Start with McLuhan. So McLuhan says something interesting about games. Games become faithful models of a culture. They incorporate both the action and the reaction of whole populations in a single dynamic image. I have no idea what that really means, but I want you to focus on the words actions and reactions, because I can really relate to that, because that's what games are about. Actions and reactions, and if you think about it in terms of community, and he wrote this in '64, so that sort of confirms he's a genius, even though many of us don't really understand him. So games as social reaction. And I'm sure there are McLuhan scholars at this university who will just say, my interpretation is completely bogus, and they're probably right, and I would invite them on the website to set me straight. Jung interprets games in his own way, and sort of what you would, I think it's an interesting take. One of the most difficult things that someone can do is to invent a good game, because you can't do it unless you're in touch with your instinctive self, which suggests that games come from an instinctive place, and that they're part of the deeper subconscious of human engagement. And it seems sensible to me, actually, if you reflect on it. And it sort of ties into this thought. This is from my colleague at the Center for Digital Media, Kim Voll. Wonderful quote, neurons that fire together, wire together. Fun is related to mastery. We do things that are fun. It makes us master them. And it actually pushes us deeper on the evolution, or further along the evolutionary scale. Horrible graphic, I'm sorry. Found it somewhere in some open, I use open source graphics as a general rule. I love that first story. 5,000-year-old gaming tokens found in Turkey. This goes back a long, long way. You know, when you think about the fact that now there are more women gamers by a factor of 2 to 1 than under 18 boy gamers, something that was just reported a couple of weeks ago. You know, and the under 18 boy gamers, you know, they want to say, look, we're hardcore, and what's going on now is not really gaming, and all this mobile stuff is not really gaming. Well, it's just one anecdotal example, but, you know, the truth is I'm playing Omar Sharif Bridge more than I'm playing iRacing. So, and I'm pretty hardcore. I've been at this for a long time. So I think it's a broader sociological thing that's going on here. But if you also put it in terms of evolution, it should be no surprise that gaming is growing so broad and so deep. There were technological and I would say inarguably misogynistic barriers that are now coming down. So it's just a series of stories. All these slides get posted if you're interested in any of them. But they have something to do with the evolutionary scale. I don't know what this third story has to do with anything except that I really, really, really love it. You might remember that the founder of Mega Upload was jailed, and what we learned subsequently was that he was the top-ranked Modern Warfare player in the world, and because they wouldn't let him play Modern Warfare from jail, his rankings dropped. I'm not exactly sure what that has to do with evolution, but I stuck it in there. Had to go somewhere. Related, This is a very recent piece that NPR did, just a short audio piece if you're interested in it, but actually the words attached to the article are really good. This is based on research. An academic named Jacques Panskep thinks play is how social animals learn the rules of being social. So all these things are related. And I will phrase it as evolution through interaction. And this applies to, going a little beyond gaming, the notion of how the web and gamifying the web can create participation in democracy. And there's lots of this stuff going on about gamification and gamifying institutions that we find valuable so that people participate in them. Because people want to play games, so how do we take things that we think people should be doing and involve them? Well, turn them into games. Whether that's right or wrong, I don't know. But the badge initiative, which is not an initiative coming from this course, it's an initiative coming from UBC, is an example of that. Let's badge games, let's put badges in courses, and maybe that'll engage students more. I don't know if it will or it won't, but that's the thought process that's out there. And that does seem to have sort of an evolutionary function. And the scale of this stuff has become so huge. Space battles in EVE Online are legendary. And I'll show you some graphics around them. But it's amazing stuff that goes on. Huge amounts of actual financial value is destroyed. And willingly, it's part of the rules of the game. So it's interesting. So here's my quiz. With apologies for how non-precise I was getting you to this point. Anybody who says we game why McLuhan says we game? A. Anybody want to vote for McLuhan? B. Social learning interaction. We got one taker. Oh, two takers. 3, 4. Okay. To be in touch with our instinctive self. 2, 3, 4. As part of evolution. Okay. We're evenly divided except for the first one. All right. So I'm not going to tell you which one is right because obviously I don't know. I'm not an academic. I can tell you, though, from a legal perspective, which of A, B, C, and D would have the most significant legal implications. McLuhan. So think about that. Social reaction, if it's the reason we game, if it's the theory behind it, has the greatest legal implications if you're a student in this course. I just had to stick up something that was public domain on the Riddler. Why that is really the rest of the course. But I want to plant the seed that social reaction and take both of those words and parse them separately and put them together is where you'll find legal implications. And I will try and make that a theme of this course to keep coming back to social reaction and McLuhan. Now, all the other stuff aside, I've already had a sentimental moment in this course and in this class. I'll have one more. You can put everything else aside. Here's best reason to game that I've seen this year. Gamer discovers his deceased father's ghost on an old Xbox game, challenges it to a race. Those of you who don't know, don't necessarily play racing games, there's something called the ghost car. Interestingly, as a legal aside, ghost cars have been patented. You actually have to pay money to have the ghost car feature in your game. Kid lost his dad when he was 6 years old. Discovered an original Xbox that had this game that he used to play with his dad. Of course, never beat his dad. And the ghost car feature worked. And he plugged in the console, saw, you can find the entire narrative in the story. Was able to play the old game, was able to see his father's ghost car, raced his father. Remember, he lost his father when he was 6, raced his father, got to the point where he was about to beat his father, realized that if you beat the ghost car, it creates a new ghost car. So the remnant, the digital remnant of his father would be gone, stop before the finish line, so that he could keep the digital version of his father playing a racing game around. Is this important legally? No. This is important, and you know what? Maybe it is in some way that I can't explain. But it's important because it shows that things that we didn't think were possible are possible, and that games are a medium of communication with limitless possibilities. And with limitless possibilities come limitless legal problems. So on that note, thank you for being part of this. Please post. Next week, we're going to deal with the following conundrum in the first hour, sort of a Zen code. Games are not IP, video games are IP. Explain. So ponder on that, and I'll talk on that, hopefully leave lots of room for discussion, and Brian Dartnell-Levier will join us in the second hour. And I learned a long time ago, always end with a cat picture.